Unity live stream. We're live now on Twitch and YouTube, and this is designing and developing Unity's MR template. So MR stands for mixed reality, and we have a lot of cool stuff coming today, including the Unity XR team. But before we get into presenting our guest, I just wanted to show you a little bit of the housekeeping stuff. So, for example, we have a amazing book that's dropping very soon on April 29. This is called The Career Game Loop: Learn to Earn in the New Economy. And it's all about how you can approach your career like a game, embracing adaptability, continuous learning, strategic growth. And if you're in the US, you can get your free copy at the link in the chat right now. So we just put the chat code. It should be the link everywhere on Twitch and YouTube. And basically, yeah, it's an amazing book that was written by Jessica Lindell and the rest of the Unity team. I really highly recommend it. And yeah, for today, we're going to talk about basically welcoming our Unity XR team, XR design principles, applying principles to mixed reality multiplayer template. We have the XR rig overview. We're going to talk a little bit about template games modes. And this is going to be fun because we're actually going to go in XR, connecting with our VR and MR headset, playing together. We have some chess games, some physics sandbox, slingshot, and so on. So stay tuned for that. And then at the end, we're going to go through a little bit of the mixed reality multiplayer template packages and a live demo. And finally, we'll wrap up with some information for the next stream. So thank you again. And without further ado, let's welcome our Unity XR team on stage. Hello, hello. I'll pass the mic to each of you so you can present yourself. So Ketki, why don't you start?
Hey everyone, my name is Ketki Jadhav. I'm a product designer in the XR team with Javier and Kevin. I've been working on hand tracking tools, the device simulator that you see in the XRI package, and a few other exciting things that I can't really share more about.
Kevin?
Yeah, hi, my name is Kevin Zakshevsky. I'm an engineer on the XR authoring team. I primarily work on Unity's XR interaction toolkit package, as well as a lot of the XR templates that you guys see in Unity Hub.
And finally, Javier.
Hello, hi. My name is Javier. I'm a senior XR product designer. I work with Ketki, Kevin, and a bunch of other great people over here at Unity. I've been working mostly on designing the templates that you can find in the hub. So it's awesome to be here so that we can give you a little bit of an overview and insights on what it goes into making some of these templates.
Yeah, and we should have had Joe with us today, but unfortunately he is sick. But this is Kevin's birthday, so I want everybody in the chat to actually wish him a happy birthday. Yes, I told you I would put you on.
Very nice.
And I didn't present myself. My name is Manuel Sainsily. You might have seen me a few months ago last year when I was hosting before Jackson. Don't worry, Jackson will be back on our live streams. He's just taking a well-deserved PTO because it's actually his birthday week as well. But yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun today together. Fun fact, I used to work with Ketki actually on the XR team when I used to do XR product design at Unity. So these are all the folks that know each other. We're going to have some fun today. And without further ado, let's go actually into the XR design principles. This is, I think, going to be a very interesting start.
Yeah, I'm excited. So yeah, let's start with the design principles. I'm going to give you all an overview of the best practices and the design thinking that goes into making mixed reality experiences. So I'm going to start with how do you go around designing impactful applications that truly embrace mixed reality. All of us are used to our phones, our laptops, our TV screens. 2D screens are so embedded in our everyday life that our default design thinking ends up being 2D screens. So we end up recreating 2D screens in mixed reality headset. But I think that's not the best way to fully make use of this exciting new medium that we have. So it requires a little bit of a mind shift when you want to design for mixed reality and you want to start tapping into some of its unique capabilities. So this is all about how you can do that. So I think of mixed reality as a mix of lessons that you can borrow from architecture. So thinking about how spaces are designed, how people move in them, how to keep lighting and textures in mind. Um, and then you can also learn a lot from industrial design, because we are creating 3D objects that are going to be interacted with, and they have to be comfortable. So you can learn a lot from industrial design, specifically about human ergonomics. And of course, this is a new medium. It is real, like you kind of get things in your real world, but it's not really real. So it makes it very exciting and creative, and you can make it feel very extraordinary and magical. So this is kind of like what I call a cheat sheet on how you can design mixed reality experiences. It's divided into 4 main sections. First one is reality selection. So how do you choose the appropriate type of reality based on the needs of your experience? How do you do input selection? So how do you match the proper type of input modality based on the intention of your application? How do you spatialize interactions? How do you create interactions that fit the medium and feel comfortable at the same time? And lastly, because this is about mixed multiplayer experiences, you'll notice that a lot of mixed reality experiences and headset really rely on collaboration, and it's all about social presence and creating human connection. So how can you engineer those connections more intentionally? Okay, so the first part is selecting the right form of reality. So I think
I love this
everybody
title, by the way. It just feels so sci-fi. We're in the Matrix. Let's select our reality.
So yeah, I think everyone on the live stream pretty much knows the terms now. It's widely used, but just a quick recap. Um, reality, mixed reality is on this whole spectrum. On one side, you have augmented reality, which is the form in which you can see your entire physical world, and then virtual objects get overlaid on top of it. And then the opposite of that would be virtual reality. So the virtual world is going to take over your entire physical world. You don't see any part of your physical world at all. And somewhere in between is mixed reality. So you can transition from AR to VR. And there are lots of different devices that support it. So you have phone-based AR, you have all these cool headsets in the market, and then yeah, you have like VR would be PlayStation VR, and somewhere in between would be all of this other range of devices. When you are creating for augmented reality, it inherently is a more complex medium to design for, because you are seeing your entire physical world. There are a lot of variables that come into play. You have changing lighting, varying textures, moving objects. Let's say you are designing something that is meant for a demo environment. You're sitting in your living room, you're using that as your ideal canvas, but then you switch it and you give the experience to your friend who has a completely different room type. However you've designed it, it might not work in that other space at all. Another example will be if you are designing for a solo space, but then you take the headset out to a cafe where there are lots of people moving in and out. Like there are different design thinkings that you want to apply, because you want the user's focus to be on things that you're designing. So yeah, inherently, AR is a little bit more complex. VR, on the other hand, you have complete control over the environment. So if you are designing for the medium that lies in between, mixed reality that switches between AR and VR, a tip would be to start with the more complex one, start with augmented reality, and then strip it down to make it more appropriate for VR. It just feels easier that way. And then another tip is, if you do pick mixed reality, you want to plan for a seamless transition between those two mediums. And Javier has some excellent examples in the end to show how we can do this. And then one more thing that you want to keep in mind is AR just generally feels really magical, because you have your real world, it feels like you're getting things inside your world, so it's exciting. So a lot of times people end up picking it because it feels novel, it feels exciting. But if your intention is to create a fully immersive experience, to eliminate distractions, to deepen engagement, VR might actually be a better choice. So this is a screenshot of Beat Saber, which is one of the most successful VR games. And in that case, VR works perfectly well. If you have, on the other hand, if the need for your application is something like medical collaboration, where you need the context of a surgical environment or digital human scans, then in that case, you have to use AR and you don't have any other choice. So yeah, this one is about input selection. And yeah, so all the mixed reality devices come with multiple input types. The most common one, which comes with all mixed reality headsets since the beginning of time, is controllers. And it makes sense why it's like a separate hardware. It's like a tool. Humans have always created tools to extend the ability of our hands. Hardware or tools, they provide a lot of precision and accuracy. They are comfortable for long durations. They are comfortable for different distances. This is also one of the input types in mixed reality that allows haptics, which involves more senses and it makes things feel more real. But controllers come with some cons, like it has a battery life, it can get lost, it can get damaged. And if you are switching between controllers and hands, which is what you would typically see, if you're not thinking of the environment of the user, are they going to be able to, do they have a table around them? Do they have pockets to keep the controller down? You might be creating moments of friction or moments of frustration for the user. So you just want to be more mindful of who exactly is your audience and where will they be using these experiences. The next one is hand trap. Oh, sorry, did it switch? Yeah. The next one is hand tracking, one of the next most common one. It is also, your hands are almost always available. And I say almost because you might be carrying a few things in your hand, you might have an injured hand, you might not have a hand. So it's not a given that you'll always have it, but yeah, it's mostly, it is one of the most available options. It is fast and comfortable for low physical effort action. So if I had to do a pinching action or a poking action at comfortable distance, it is very fast and comfortable. But on the flip side of that, it can get pretty fatiguing if you have to do a lot of stretching or more like difficult poses. It can also lead to social awkwardness. Like if you told me to sit in a cafe right now and wave my hands around, like that's going to feel very awkward. And then one of the more complex things is if you create new gestures, it's always very hard to explain what exactly to do to people. Like even if I tell you to do a pinch, I can guarantee like everyone here does the pinch slightly differently, and you need to account for all of those differences. When you go into more complex gesture territory, it requires teaching. And generally, if hand tracking is bad, it can feel like a pretty frustrating experience. And hand tracking can get thrown off in different ways. Like sometimes it can be bad lighting, you can have reflective jewelry, reflective nail colors, tattoos even throw hand tracking off. So if things like this are throwing off hand tracking, it can get frustrating over time. Then you have voice, which is typically used in mixed reality headsets for text entry, because entering text on mixed reality, it's just a pain. Voice is the fastest way to do it. It's also the most intuitive. But again, in social settings, it can be pretty awkward. It can also have privacy issues in social settings. Like if you're going to make someone say their password out loud or more secure information, people will not be comfortable with that. And then there's always the issue with not being able to decipher lisps and slurs and accents. And then the last one, which is more new form of input, is eye tracking, which is, it's new, it's novel. It's generally pretty fast for um, targeting things with your eyes for medium and large objects. You'll notice that if things get really tiny, like let's say the size of a color picker, you don't really have too much fine control over your eye movement. Not saying that you can't add in design, but it needs a lot more effort. And generally, the way the models work right now, it requires pairing with another input. There, I have seen experiences where people use only eyes, but it does get a little fatiguing over time. And this input is also one of the only ones that you don't have full conscious control over. So let's say I flash a bright light on something. You are going to look towards it. You don't really have full control over eyes like some of the other mediums. So you should just be aware of the pros and cons of all the inputs to make a good decision on what works best for your app. And then the third section is about spatializing interactions. This is about how do you make interactions feel spatial and more fitting for mixed reality. So there are different interaction zones in mixed reality. The first one that you have to be aware of is called the field of view. That is the viewable area for your user. And you need to know that, and it changes based on different hardware devices. You need to know that to know how to place objects inside your experience. And then you have the far field, which is generally, and these are all distances based on just the average human size. So anything that is beyond 0.6 meters is generally considered far field, which is basically if you stretch your hand too much, it's going to be not super comfortable. You can't directly reach things. And then you have the near field, which is 0.4 meters to 0.6 meters. And that is considered like things that are close to you. So far field, like I mentioned, it's out of direct reach zone. This area is typically used for controller and ray-based interactions. In the near field, where you're usually looking down, that is also a thing, like your posture changes in each of these fields. Things will be easier to touch. Your hands will be in a more comfortable position. These are typically reserved for hand tracking based interactions. And then I mentioned the field of view. If the way you place objects and if they move in and out of the field of view, you want to think of adding special behaviors on them so that you can call attention to it whenever it's needed. And you can place things more intentionally based on their purpose. So for example, if the screen is very far away, you can attach it to the virtual world. If you have a controller and you want to explain what certain buttons mean, you want helper tooltips on it, they can actually be attached to the controller. And when you move the controller around, they'll move with it. If there are some critical notifications, they can get attached to the head itself so that you can't like shake them away and you really need people to take action on them. And then something like a keyboard, it can actually get attached to, it can be relative to your body. So this is like a really magical example. Like in reality, everybody is moving around a little bit, but in real life, you'll have to take your laptop, you'll have to go back to it and bring it back with you. But a keyboard in mixed reality can actually just be attached at a certain distance and it can like lazy follow you wherever you're going. And you can do that to a bunch of different objects. So these are the examples of different placement behaviors that you can add. And all of this can feel a lot, but the good news is we have interactables, we have all these pre-created behaviors and a lot more in Unity's XR templates. And Javier is also going to talk about how we have created some of these for the MR template.
Yes. It's actually pretty cool to see also the concept of lazy keyboard. I like it in particular because it kind of follows you, but there's kind of a little lag. So it feels like it's almost having its own life of itself.
Yeah.
You feel like magical, like you said, like it's attached to your body. You can move it around. Thanks for that, Ketki. Actually, a lot of cool comments in the chat. People saying, thanks for speaking about the design aspect of XR, which is too often, I would say, put on the side towards the engineering sides. But today we have both, which is the beauty of this group at Unity. Is like we have designers, we have engineers. We do have a quick question before we move to the next one. Someone was asking any chance you could talk about knowing and designing specifically around the hardware you'll be releasing on, like knowing if you're going to do on a specific hardware, would that change your thinking, your design thinking?
I don't think I fully understand. Knowing the limitations of the hardware beforehand, or
Yeah, I guess like knowing which hardware you're going to release your game on, would that affect in a certain way the way you design your XR experience?
yeah. So if I can go back to slide number, yeah. So here I have shown like all of these different hardwares. If you are falling in that spectrum of augmented reality, you want to keep in mind things that I mentioned here, that you are going to have a lot of variables coming into the environment. Even in mixed reality, there are things that are going to be more leaning towards augmented reality. So you want to be really conscious of the environment, and you want to start off first. When you even think of what the experience needs to be, you need to map out who is going to be using it and what potential environments they will be using it. And there will be lots of different variations of that. But the main thing that you want to keep in mind is the distinction between, is it an isolated solo space, or is it a social space? Because social spaces like cafes or parks are more complicated. If you're designing like a solo living room experience, that's a little bit different. VR, like I mentioned, is a lot more controlled because you can just do whatever you want. And then, I think hardware, the main thing would be whether it's AR or whether it's VR, and then also the input types. Like, does it have eye tracking? Does it have hand tracking? Does it have controller? And then you want to mix both of those things and then look at that pros and cons list and see where it falls. And
Love
Javier and
that.
Kevin, if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think you covered it perfectly. Like really between hardware, you'll have like different feature sets. Like some hardware will support controllers, some won't. Some have eye tracking, some don't. So always consider the types of inputs that you will have access to and design around those. And if you want to design for all of the headsets, then you're just going to have to draw parallels of where things overlap and then make those your targets. I think that would be a good recommendation.
Exactly.
Yeah, starting with the most complex one. I think also another one is some hardwares come with just one controller, some come with two controllers. So starting with the least common denominator, everything should work with just one controller if you're going to go cross-platform. And then the extra controller just becomes like a assistant. You don't really need it. Yeah.
That's a great advice. Thanks, Cyberstate, for the question. And he also added that, good onboarding UX to help with deciding how to figure out which interaction and inputs to use for your experience. I recommend anyone that's in the chat to also read the chat. We have a lot of knowledge dropping there from the community. So thank you for your questions. And we'll continue because we're a little bit behind, but we want to make sure to give you all of this information. So we'll keep the questions for the live demo at the end. If we don't get a chance to answer everything, don't feel bad, but still drop them in the chat. I read everything. Thank you, Ketki. That was an amazing primer. So now we're going to talk about how to apply those principles that you just shared with us to the mixed reality multiplayer template. Let's get into it.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about this. But before we do, or I do, I'd like to show the product highlight video for the Unity MR multiplayer tabletop template. We're going to play it without audio, so we could just talk over it as it plays. Oh, there we have audio. Great.
Is it free?
We do have the audio. I think we should mute it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So yeah, this is all designed around a virtual table, as the name implies, and you have the ability to create private or public tables and have virtual co-presence with up to 4 participants. We've included a bunch of great samples inside of this, from UI to mini games. I'll be covering that in the following slides, and then we'll be able to take a look at it in the context of the editor and a build at the end. So yeah, from what you can gather on the video, this is like a 3-person session. Someone's recording, 2 other people are playing between each other. There's cooperative games, there's competitive games, and there's open-ended gameplay samples. So yeah, we hope that you check it out. It's available in the Unity Hub. You can download it today. We have also added a lot of work into the onboarding in editor tutorial process, which we'll cover again later. So yeah, we hope that you enjoy it, and I'll begin talking about how we apply some of the principles into this specific template. So we can move on to the next one. Yeah, so in the mixed reality multiplayer tabletop template, each person who's remotely co-located is represented as a stylized avatar with fully articulated hands, a neck, and mouth. This is intended to be simple so that you can swap in the assets for the ones that you might want to use instead. So you can always replace the mesh and the aesthetic of the avatars.
Why would you want to replace those handsome gentlemen and ladies? But yes, you can.
Avatars. Yeah. On top of each avatar, we display a distance-based scalable name tag UI, which displays the person's initials, their name, and a microphone status indicator, which also doubles up as a microphone mute button. People are automatically assigned a seat and a shirt color based on the order in which they join a table. So this approach prevents people from overlapping on top of each other on the same spot, and keeps things orderly. After joining, participants can swap seats using the table UI without having any physical movement. So it's very easy to just go from seat 1 to seat 2 without having to physically locomote. To account for socially acceptable distancing, our avatar shader includes a dither effect, which automatically fades out an avatar's visuals when a minimum distance has been reached between participants. So this way we sort of like avoid situations where people are too close together and you begin to see sort of like the mesh intersecting your field of view, which can get very awkward. And yeah, it's a good consideration to keep in mind. I also want to reiterate that avatars are a very complex topic, so please consider doing some thorough research ahead of time to provide appropriate visual representation for the intended experience that you're designing for. We can move on to the next one. So yeah, as Ketki mentioned earlier, inputs in XR provide a wide range of options to choose from. It's important to consider the context of the experience that you're designing for and select the input modalities that provide the best possible experience. Always consider input fallbacks and provide accessibility options such as visual aids, audio cues, haptic toggles, or voice commands, and also remappable inputs. This way you can deliver the most inclusive experience. In this particular case, we knew ahead of time that most of the interactions would happen on a horizontal virtual surface, which would have to be placed within arm's reach in order to interact with it. So that's the near field that Ketki was talking about earlier. To inform our decisions, we also conducted a bunch of internal testing sessions with the team, which surfaced relevant insights. So for example, distant interactions using raycast visualizations were not super helpful, given the close proximity between the interactive UI elements. So therefore, we decided to deactivate the rays and instead prioritize direct interactions such as poke and grab using both controllers and hands. As an additional consideration, all UI buttons make use of depth offsets and provide consistent state, visual, and audio feedback to clearly communicate their pressable affordances. This is something that you'll also find in the sample. There's a script where you can set those values for the offset, and once you're like pushing a button, it will like actually move, and it makes it feel so much better. We can move on to the next. So yeah, locomotion systems, these are huge. When considering the type of experience that you're designing for, choosing an appropriate locomotion system is one of the most important decisions. In XR, there's several methods to provide locomotion, which is how a person moves through a virtual space. Each type of reality comes with specific considerations. Some have already been covered by Ketki. So in virtual reality, the most notable examples for locomotion include continuous movement and teleportation. And there's different methods to accomplish this, right? So some use controllers or a button. There's a bunch of different things. The good thing is that you can check out the Unity VR and Unity VR multiplayer templates for practical examples for these systems, which we provide. In the MR multiplayer tabletop template, people can see and interact with their physical space. So direct movement made the most sense as the locomotion system. which is what we moved with.
Actually, quickly, there's someone in the chat. I think it's XTC Tina C3 and Prince that were asking about this. And like he just said, like those templates are available. We also have a 3-part YouTube tutorial series that dropped on YouTube not too long ago. Not a lot of people know that it's there. It just got refreshed. It's amazing. So if you have more questions after the live and you feel like you want to dive into that, I highly recommend it.
Yeah. Yeah, that tutorial is great. And I think that uses the VR multiplayer template as the base.
Which we will look at very soon.
Yeah, so we can move on to the next one. So this is, I'm going to spend some time on this. I'll try to go through it quickly, but there's a lot to cover. The MR multiplayer tabletop template provides a shared virtual table for people to interact with. We use the table as a social anchor, which brings people together as they gather around it. To ensure that the table is correctly displayed in front of each person, we define specific parameters that calculate a person's height based on their head-mounted display's position. And then we apply an offset to the table's placement so that it appears within an ideal comfort zone where people can easily reach out and adjust its position based on their needs. This virtual table measures 80 by 80 centimeters and provides UI and gameplay samples that you can use and modify in your own projects. The virtual table, so the image here on the right, displays several local UI options and affordances. So on the bottom left, you'll find the XR immersion and control UI, which lets you define the reality mode in which the experience takes place. I'll cover that in a later slide in a little bit more detail. Then on the bottom right, if you want to do just one click, yeah. So when you press that button, you'll get an expandable menu that you can hide or display. It gives you access to table options. It gives you access to renaming your avatar. The next icon is a list of public tables, and then you have audio settings in there. Then you have a microphone toggle that's always available, and you can close that out. Yeah, we can move on to the next one. The table can be moved using the grab bar affordance, which you can use either controllers or hands to reposition it anywhere in your space. And then it can also be rotated. If we click one more, yeah, you can click rotated. It's constrained to the vertical axis, so that there's no awkward rotations and alignment issues. And these affordances are revealed once you hover on top of the corners, which is pretty neat. So always remember to leverage the magic of the medium and think of simple ways to make virtual objects feel real. Ketki was talking about this earlier. We don't have to inherit all of the constraints of the physical world. So for example, the virtual table can float. It can rotate while remaining perfectly level with a physical horizontal surface. It can be rapidly manipulated without any of the virtual objects on it falling. It can also provide collision and haptics if placed on top of a physical surface. So think about creative ways of how you can leverage the magic of the medium and make it feel real, but don't bring in the burden of things that you are limited by in the physical world. One more thing I want to mention. Yeah,
sorry to interrupt. Baroque Dub on Twitch was saying, would also be good to be able to pin the table to a world anchor. And I guess that's what you're just referring to. We can actually leave it somewhere. There's haptic feedback that can be associated, so you feel like you're actually placing it in your real world.
Yeah, that's completely right. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that we've made it very easy to modify the look of the virtual table's visuals. So I know it has a very specific look for this, but we have a shader graph that's included in the sample so that you can change the shape of the table, the colors of the table, the inner there's like a grid in the middle, so you can change the grid density, the shapes that are displayed, the edge thickness, everything. So take advantage of that and just make it your own. We can move on to the next one. Yeah, so this is showing the XR immersion control, which is a control, the UI that's located at the bottom left corner of the table. So if you press that, let's do a click, then we show sort of like a volume when you're in mixed reality mode. So you go from AR to MR, and then from MR to VR. So if you press one time more, the environment will become an immersive sort of like virtual environment. And if this looks familiar, it's because we leveraged it from a previous project that the XR team had worked on. So we hope that you can use it in your projects. It's a pretty neat tool. The table includes four, yeah, we can move on to the next one. Yeah, so there's 4 specific game modes that we include with this template. starting with the empty table, which is the default mode. You know, like when you go into the table, we make it very conversational. People can sort of like get acquainted with each other before they jump into an activity. You can then change the game to the physics sandbox mode. So if we click one more time, this is where we display a bunch of physics toys, and they're intercombinable. And the point of this is to make it like open-ended play. You grab these toys, you place them around your space, and you sort of like see them react with your environment. Then we have the slingshot game, which is a cooperative survival game where up to 4 people can work together to prevent the balloons from reaching a vortex that's placed on top. It has a time mechanic, and it showcases predefined areas of interaction, which you have to intersect using either hands or controllers to pull back, aim, and release a little projectile that would hit the balloons to pop them before they escape through the vortex. This can get pretty fun, and it's pretty challenging, so we hope that you check it out. And then finally, we have the chess game. We click one more time. And once again, this might look familiar. It came from another project that the very talented folks at the XR team worked on a while ago. So yeah, this, unlike previous game modes, this is a 1v1 type of game. And it's also something that we load dynamically as a scene in the editor, where the other games are sort of like baked into the table. Kevin's going to go over that later when we go into the editor, so you can take a look at how those two systems work, which is pretty neat. So if you want to bring in like a game that you built in a scene separately, you can plug it into the table and it sort of like loads it. It feels pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah, so we hope you have some fun with these games, and can't wait to see what you build with them. Let's see, I think we have one more slide, about ancillary UI. So for ancillary, it's really like things that are secondary or auxiliary to the experience, right? Like somebody on the chat, I think, mentioned UX onboarding. This is the perfect sort of like type of UI to present for someone that's going into the experience for the first time. So the image on the left is supposed to represent coaching cards. So these can display supporting visuals such as images, animation, or video, text, and buttons, and are most useful for first-time users. Always consider adding opt-outs for returning users to skip onboarding cards, as they might find it very frustrating to have to read through understood concepts repeatedly. So if it's like the second time, third time that you come into the experience and you're always presented with the same onboarding and you always have to go through it, it's going to become a nuisance. So try not to do that. Make it skippable. And then the other image on the right, this is meant to represent notifications. So these keep people informed of important system events. So like when you mute or unmute your microphone, or if you lose connection of your microphone, it's always reminding people of status notifications. They don't have to explicitly interact with them, but you have to be careful for not spamming notifications. So always try to like evaluate what information is the most critical in the experience you're designing for, so that people can remain engaged and not become overwhelmed or distracted. One design consideration for these types of UI is to always implement body-centric constraints, just like Ketki mentioned earlier. Like think about where they would be more useful, and how to present them the best way possible, so that the UI remains within the field of view without introducing discomfort. Also pay special attention when implementing secondary UI, and provide appropriate safeguards to ensure a comfortable placement distance between the UI and the person. You don't want to put them too close, because there's going to be versions accommodation where your eyes sort of like go crossed, and that could create discomfort in the person. When using a follow behavior on the UI, tune the time of the delay. So before the element begins to move, it should never feel like it's like stuck on your face, because that can also become very uncomfortable. So we have scripts inside the sample that let you control like a delay time and a follow speed, so that things can feel like fluid and not annoying. So I think that's it from me. I'll pass it over to Kevin so we can take a look at the project in the editor.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to drop another chatbot command in the chat that will give you a link to the mixed reality template quick start guide. So I've seen a lot of comment asking about, hey, where do we get access to this? So the link is in the chat now. Thank you so much, Javier. That was really cool. And also shout out to the icons and UI for this presentation. It was really, really, really nice. My design eye is tingling. All right, so
Very
let's
cool.
get into the next section.
Yeah. So I'm going to take a second here. Let me share my screen. And I'm going to go over the editor experience for the MR multiplayer tabletop template. So as Javier and Ketki mentioned, this is all available in Unity Hub right now. If you wanted to start up a new project and follow along, you could do so. You'll see pretty much what I'm seeing here. This is a new project from scratch. And I'm just going to walk through the editor and the tutorials and kind of outline the scene setup and give a high-level overview of some of the configurations and features and settings that you can tweak to customize it. And then we'll go and do a live demo where I will be, I guess, acting cameraman from the editor, and Javier and Ketki will join me in their headsets. So cool. So when you start it up, you get this welcome dialog, which gives you a link to the quick start guide that Manu was just talking about, and a quick link here to begin configuring your project for mixed reality and multiplayer. So if you click that, this will take you to the tutorial on the right-hand side here for configuring Unity Cloud setup and Unity Gaming Services. This is all pretty much configured for you out of the box, but this is a nice little kind of step-by-step guide of walking you through what each component is. And this popped up on my other screen here, dual monitors and such. So this brings you right to the Services tab in the project settings. Let me drag this over. And this has your UGS configuration all ready to go for you. But if you needed to change your organization, unlink your project, or do any other configurations, that could be done through this tab in project settings. And then additionally, in the Services tab, the tutorial will take you over to Vvox, which is what we use for voice chat services. Again, this is all configured for you, so you should just be able to fire this up out of the box and go. But the Vvox settings is also configurable under the Services tab. All right, so that's our UGS setup complete. So now we're going to look a little bit more at the scene itself. So at a high level, the MR multiplayer tabletop scene has 6 main items here. We'll go into each of them, but we have some network objects, as well as the MR interaction setup. If you've done any other XR development or are familiar with XRI, this is essentially where our XR rig lives. We have a virtual table here, which is the actual, well, let me click the thing, the actual like table element that you see in front of you. And then the UI component contains all of the UI that is overlaid on top of the table. So it's broken down nice and easy for you to figure out where you want to modify the scene. All right.
And a reminder that those tutorials are actually pretty nice also for first-time users. If you never use Unity, this is your first time experiencing that you could do something in XR, you can download this template today and for the first time install it and actually follow the tutorial to understand the ecosystem and the editor interface.
Yeah. Not to sidetrack, but that tutorials tab also contains a bunch of information that will take you to forums. If you have any questions, we have documentation about the UGS, the Unity Gaming Services. You have access to a bunch of resources right there and then, so do take advantage of it. And if you have any feedback, there's also a feedback link where you could send us feedback and reread it, and we'll be able to address like whatever concerns or feature requests you may have.
And the team actually reads the feedback. Plus it's gamified, so you see as you progressed in the tutorials, those check marks getting filled up.
Yeah. I think, Javier, does the VR multiplayer template also have a tutorial like this as well?
Yeah, both multiplayer templates contain a very similar style of like in-editor tutorial.
I believe
we'll be updating other XR templates to also include them in the future.
That's what I was just about to say, yeah. Sorry. So we're working on that as well. But yeah, here, if you ever lose that configuration, you could always come back to this tutorials tab, and this is the UGS configuration, and the template tutorial is right here in the sidebar for you.
Yeah, and if you ever close that tutorials tab, maybe we show people how you can get it back.
Yeah, let's do it.
From the top.
From the Windows menu. You put me on the spot here. You're like, you definitely know where the tutorials thing.
It's on the tutorials. So next to window, there's tutorials.
Yeah, thank you.
Show tutorials.
Oh no! It swapped my screen here.
Or just use the search bar. Use the search bar.
We're doing it live. There it
All
is.
You just
All right,
assume
no
he's
more-
such an expert, so you never know where the tutorials are.
That's it. No more improvisation. All right, here we go. All right, so the template tutorials. Wow, I'm 75. Let's make sure this is the right one. Okay, cool. Right project. All right, so let's go back from the top here. So I actually want to go back to the scene overview. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Scene tutorial. Okay, cool. I just wanted to point out in the sample scene here, it says in the tutorial, but the device simulator is enabled by default in this template, which I think is unique to the multiplayer templates, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think that's the case for the VR and the MR template by themselves. So when you hit play, you will be able to join the scene and in the simulator mode in the editor to kind of hit the ground running. So if you want to disable that, I do know where that is. That is in project settings here. Under, it won't let me click because I'm in the tutorial, but in XR Interaction Toolkit there, you can disable the simulator. But for our purposes in this demo, we want that enabled. So, all right, let's keep going through this. All right, so first off, we have the Network Game Manager, and this is kind of the high level, the highest level like connection piece for all the services in the MR template. I'm going to say MR tabletop template just to be specific. So there are some useful configurations here in the network object, I believe. Let's see. Oh, no, it's in the network game manager object here. So this is one to auto connect on lobby join. That's a useful setting for you. And then the other one we wanted to call out was the voice chat properties. This is how you enable like the different like fall off distances and configure that for the scene that you're in or the lobby that you're in. But there are some, Javier, correct me if I'm wrong here. If you modify this at runtime, it could cause some issues with VVox. Is that right?
Yeah, I think you want to change it not during runtime.
Yeah.
And then you just test in runtime.
And anything that says network is for multiplayer capabilities. So you could be doing this solo and then you won't need any of the network pieces.
That's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Oop, I double clicked too fast. All right. And then not to be confused with the network game manager, we also have the network manager. So this is the high level connection for netcode for game objects. So think of this as kind of your objects that you want to network across the multiple sessions. The important config here in this network manager XR multiplayer component, we have this list here of networked prefabs. So this points to a scriptable object list in our assets here, and this contains a list of all of the objects that we want to have networked. So if you want your interactable objects networked, they should be in this list and configured in this script here in order to do that. And then if you scroll down a little bit in the network manager here, we have this Unity transport component here. And this is used for various things like disconnect timeout. So we have our disconnect timeout set pretty high because people, when we're testing and people are using it, sometimes they'll don and doff their headset. So it's better to not time them out immediately as soon as they do that. So a bunch of different configurations here as well. And then while we're talking about network configuration, there's also this debug simulator aspect here of the Unity transport, where you can simulate different network conditions. So as you're developing, if you want to test what it's like with a certain amount of packet delay or jitter or drop rate, you can configure this and kind of see how your app responds and debug.
You can even go all the way up to like simulating a complete disconnection from the internet, which is super useful for use cases outside of the normal way of the game whirling. And you can test that before you actually experience it with your users.
Yeah. All right. Yep, I think I covered all that. All right. And here we have the MR interaction setup. So you can see this prefab. Again, if you guys are familiar with XRI and any of our configurations and samples, this will all look very, very familiar to you. So the top level here contains some elements about like the general XR interaction stuff, which you shouldn't need to configure. But if you look underneath the rig, we have the components for the left controller, right controller, left hand, and right hand. And these are all configured with the poke and near far interactors that Javier was talking about. So all the interactor elements are set up in this rig for you. So as soon as you launch it, you'll be able to grab with controllers, hands, all that good stuff right out of the box. Let's see. Additionally, what else do we have here? We have the player avatar. I think we'll get into that a little bit more later. All right. All right, so that is the high-level scene setup. And now we'll take a look at the player setup. Okay, so this is your networked player avatar. So this is where you would go and configure most of the visuals for your player. So we have some example code in some of these tutorials, like setting the player color, which can be done via the networked player color update. And this also contains the avatar IK and some hand pose replicator scripts as well. Javier, am I missing anything about these visuals here, the player avatars? Anything you want to call out?
Well, just to reiterate that it's very easy for you to swap meshes. You know, if you want to apply your own style to avatars or modify the material, you know, if you're not into the purple theme, you can add, you know, your own colors to it. So yeah, just have fun with it. And we also, I guess, like to call it out here, the reason why this avatar is wearing a crown, that's sort of like what we use to represent who the host is in a shared session. So only one person will be wearing the crown, and that is the host. A little bit silly, but just good to know that you know, when you jump into a multiplayer session.
Mutant Fish on Twitch says, "What an awesome template! The depths is crazy." Thank you. Yes, it is.
The crown is a pretty awesome way to, like, a good example of how to translate a 2D identifier in a 3D world. Like on Zoom or something, you'll just have host written, but you can get more creative and playful in mixed reality and do fun things like this.
Yeah. And thank you, Praveen Kumar, saying, "Great work, guys. Appreciate that."
Thank you.
Cool. All right, I kind of touched on this, but here also is the IK system. So we have the avatar IK, which handles the position and rotation of the avatar's head and torso. I think, Javier, you were mentioning that earlier, or maybe Ketki with like the neck rotation and stuff. And then as well as the hand pose replicator, which allows you to translate those hand poses across the network for both controllers and hand tracking. So all of that stuff can be found in the XRI networked player avatar prefab.
Quick question, Kevin, from Baroque Dub. How modular are the networking and voice components, like if you wanted to use solutions other than UGS?
That's a great question. Javier, you worked more closely with Joe. Do you know anything about that as far as like using other components or like third-party stuff?
I'm sure it's possible. Really, the focus for this template was to sort of like highlight our offerings, and that's why we're sort of like using all of the UGS services. So you have like all-encompass solutions that we provide for you to leverage. But if you wanted to add your own providers, I'm sure there's a way to do it. We would need someone more technical to actually go into that. Like probably Joe would know the answer, but
I can talk
here in the chat.
bit.
Just answer.
I haven't worked too much with the networking stuff on this, but I would imagine that I know a lot of the stuff that we've done can be taken and translated to other systems. Like a lot of the like work here is you'll see them in the MR tabletop assets folder. So I'm sure a lot of that script, if it doesn't translate one-to-one, I think modifying it to adapt to your chosen solution would be a little probably easier than writing it from scratch, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Baruch says, "Thank you. That's fair enough." Also, Joe just added in the chat, I think it's important to reflect here. This template does not currently support host migration out of the box, which is coming soon, by the way. So it's important to know who the host is in the case they leave and destroy the room.
Yeah.
That's great. Did you say that was from Joe in the chat?
Yeah, because he's sick and he cannot just
that's perfect.
Off,
Thanks,
right?
Joe. Joe, keep chiming in. Let me know if I missed anything.
Go to sleep, Joe. All right.
Yeah, go to sleep. All right, cool. All right, so the next one here we have the player name tag. Javier covered this, but it's pretty great. It has LOD, so based on how far you are, it will scale up and scale down, and minimize itself to just your initials based on distance. And then it also has the mute button that you can do in real time, where just while you're using it, if someone's too loud or whatever, you can just mute them from their little player tag. So super useful there. Cool.
Baruch saying these templates are what really sets Unity apart from the competitors in the field of VR MR. It's true. I don't know if there's a lot of templates out there for other engines, but we're trying to do a good job, at least without comparing it to the competition, to just like provide more value to users. And it's hard. Getting into XR is not easy. We know it. So as much as we can deliver so that the building blocks are easy to play with, that's the goal of that team.
I'm sure you maybe you guys have covered this in previous live streams too, but we've recently, I guess it was not so recent anymore, but we redid all of our XR templates with new designs and stuff, and really tried to add a lot of stuff in the template assets folder, so it could be easily removed if you just wanted to start from scratch, and you could kind of pull all the extra stuff we've added out. But we have a lot of great scripts and prefabs in there that I think make developing for XR, it saves a lot of time going forward, because a lot of the stuff that folks want, we're trying to just kind of solve at a high level out of the box for folks. So cool. All right, so here we have the table UI. So this is all the UI elements that are overlaid on the table itself. So your menus and your keyboards and your mute buttons and all that good stuff there. That will be found under the table UI in this UI element. So broken down nice and clearly there, all UI stuff under the UI.
Yeah, just to chime in on that, like I think it's good to note that these are great examples for you to leverage on how these buttons are already set up for you with visual states and what I talked about earlier, the XR poke follow affordance, where there's like a slight offset on the button, and it really feels great when you're like pushing it with that feedback as the sort of like the backplate meets the background panel. So do take a look at those and leverage them however you see fit. But we just put them in there for you to reference or get inspired and make them better. You can also change the colors and forms and icons, so they're very
and
easy.
The functionality. Add some more buttons of your own, whatever your needs are. But the baseline is all there for you.
Sick.
All right. So this is lobby UI. This is the UI aspect for joining the lobby. Very straightforward here as I'm going through all of these. Okay, and the network tabletop manager. This is a cool one. Javier, maybe you'll have also more to say about the design process with this. So the network tabletop manager handles placing the players in seats and allows you to kind of properly configure them so that you're not, having players overlap when they join at the same time. Was there any particular like design thoughts going into this, Javier?
Yeah, we just wanted to make it super easy for people to move around seats. Instead of forcing you to physically move to the right side to be on seat 2 and then select that you're going to be sitting there, we sort of like automate it. So we provide you a bar. You can see it there in the scene view, although it's a little bit obfuscated right now.
Yeah.
But we'll go over it when we jump into the HMDs.
In the live demo.
There's buttons there for you to quickly swap seats, and if all seats are taken, then you have the ability to sort of like request a seat change from someone that's sitting opposed to you or any other seat, and then you can sort of like swap seats. And we also provide a way to hide avatars if you happen to be co-located physically in the same space. So you don't want to have a person in front of you with a virtual avatar on top. You just turn their avatar off, and so you can see them more clearly. So there's a bunch of little things that we built in there for trying to provide a good UX, hopefully.
All right, cool. Here we'll just go on the game modes real quick. The big thing we wanted to call out for the game mode that Javier mentioned is that some of them are, let's go to the tutorial part of it. The game mode types, yeah. So the chess game is additively loaded, and the slingshot and the sandbox games are existing in the scene. So this template also gives you a great example of like, say I want to build, a bunch of different game modes. here's some game mode data that needs to persist through the scene, and here's a game mode that I actually want to like dynamically load on request. That is all available here. Let's see if the tutorial brings me over there. The sandbox game. I think the chess one is what I'm looking for. Yeah, in the chess game here, you can see the scene asset here. So we can load this scene up. And if you, again, it won't let me click because I'm in the tutorial. If we went to this scene and opened it, you would see literally, I think it's just the chessboard and the pieces and stuff, maybe the timer as well. So that is a great way to have support different game mode types depending on your needs. All right, let's go back through these. Javier, I think you covered most of these really well, honestly, in the design overview, but the interactive sandbox mode does a great job of like demonstrating like networked objects and physics specifically, because we have a lot of like physics that get applied through the, what are we referring to at the tube shooter?
Whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
I don't know what the given name of it is. But between that and like the bounce pad as well, yeah, you can kind of create some real like incredible machine like setups here, and it's super fun to mess around with. And then again, the cooperative game. This is a great way to show to like networked like scorekeeping and data tracking as well, because that's all tracked across the network as well. Super fun.
And it also saves your high score.
Oh,
yeah,
that's great. I must have not played this game enough to know, or not done well enough to know that I have a high score. All right, cool. All right, so that's the tutorial on the side here. Again, just to reiterate, it's over in the tutorials window we all learned today. I wanted to take a second and just go over a little bit about some of the, I touched on it briefly, but the rig setup, just look at a little bit in a little bit more detail.
In the meantime, everybody is just complaining that this was not available before because it's just so awesome. Like, I wish I had that in the hackathon last year. Yes, it's there now.
All right, let me just scroll down here. Some things I didn't quite cover in the tutorial overview. This is where that player avatar lives here. So you can see that guy there. That is nested underneath the MR interaction setup prefab here. The rig, again, is the main component that kind of comes in from XRI, and you can add to and modify that as we've done here. Let's see, local player canvas. Javier, which is the local player canvas here? Oh, that's a little pop-up for the UI. That's right. So we have this aspect here, the local player canvas. Javier, in his design notes, had that little notification UI that popped up in front of the user's face. That can be found here underneath this interaction setup. And the other important aspect here is the AR session data. So this is mainly used for occlusion, but this is where you can find the AR stuff. So when you're toggling between pass-through and VR mode and mixed mode, the AR session is your hub for all of that interaction work. Let's see if there's anything else. I think that's pretty much it. We cover, I think they mentioned this again, but we have the ability to switch between hands and controllers automatically. So depending on your choice of interaction type, you can do either. And that is also out of the box. Cool. I think otherwise,
while we're on the screen, does anyone know how the tutorials tab was made and if it's something that developers can have access to if they wanted to make their own developer, or is that just for Unity folks? If you don't know, that's fine. I just wanted to ask for Bobby Starr.
So actually we have, let me search it in the bar.
There should be a tutorials folder in there. I don't know if that builder is publicly available, but there's assets in there.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say as well. So you can see the, in our assets, we have the, here, let me close this.
Actually, I'm pretty sure it can be leveraged by anyone because I've seen it done. There's Code Monkey has some great inner tutorial.
Oh, that's true.
Leverages this system.
I was going to say that as well. And also you can see here, I'm pretty sure these are just assets in the project, so you can modify these. So you could probably just duplicate them and go about your customizing business with these guys here. Yep.
There was also a previous question about, if I remember correctly, Baroque Dub. Is speech-to-text a new part of the Unity MR template? And if yes, what AI model is being used for this?
So we do not have speech to text at the moment in the templates. So the shorter answer to that is no, not at the moment.
Perfect.
But
I can
as I
answer
mentioned,
that. You could
Yeah.
install Centis and run your own speech to text model on device at runtime, and I've seen people do that.
And as far as getting that work into the templates, we are constantly updating these. So keep an eye out, especially as the newer Unity versions roll out. If you go to the hub and you click read more on a template, you can see what version of the template you're on. So you can compare an older version that you use to a newer version. And a lot of times we are mostly it's updating like package dependencies like XRI, adding cool new features from ARF. We're trying to always keep our templates up to date with what the packages have out. So that would be the place to find it in the future. Check the updates to the templates there.
Sick.
Cool. Any other questions before I continue on?
No, you can keep going.
Cool. All right. The one thing we wanted to go over real quick here is some of the packages that we're using for this. I should have opened this beforehand. My package manager has been a little slow these past few days, but let's take a look over here. The main things I wanted to call out, let me close all these. The main thing I wanted to call out here is some of the core XR packages that we're using. So for our interaction aspect of it, we're using XR Interaction Toolkit. There we go. Nice. So we're using XRI. So this is where you can find all your player rigs, your interactable objects, your interactors that allow you to interact with said objects, and any of your core like interaction framework, teleportation, locomotion, that can all be found in XRI. We have a bunch of samples as well that you can import into your project. And if you are starting from a template, a lot of these are already imported because we're building on top of them and then modifying them to kind of build these templates. So that's a big one. The other thing I wanted to point out was this is built on OpenXR. This is using OpenXR. So porting this from like a Quest platform to like an Android XR platform, it should be extremely easy and straightforward because OpenXR provides that capability for us. So if you are concerned about what platform you're targeting, these templates are a great place to start, and they provide that flexibility for you going forward.
Baroque Deb said, it just noticed Oculus permissions in the AR session manager. Assuming this is all OpenXR, would this work on all platforms like Vision Pro, Quest 3, Pico, etc.?
Yeah, we have some configuration stuff for the template support. How do I phrase this? There are stuff that we call out specifically for Oculus. Like it's not in this sample at the moment, but we have like a permissions manager that is specific to like Oculus permissions and like Android permissions and stuff. So our goal here is to cover the broad spectrum of your platforms with this out of the box. So if you see other stuff from other platforms, typically it's to cover the bases of those, but they won't be used for the platforms they're not applicable to.
Perfect.
Cool. And then the other packages I just want to call out XR Hands for our hand support, as well as AR Foundation for all of the pass-through aspects. AR Foundation is releasing, I think someone mentioned spatial anchors as well. I think that's an update coming pretty soon to the MR template. So check that out with AR Foundation. And then I mentioned this earlier, but we have multiplayer services and Vivox for voice, as well as netcode for game objects. So those are the main kind of like XR and network multiplayer packages that we're using. So take a look at each of those if you're interested in their details. They all have great documentation to give a little bit more insight into their backgrounds. How are we on time? I'm flipped over.
Oh, you're good. We can keep going. Yeah.
I was just gonna say
earlier when I said we were running behind, literally 3 people jumped in the chat and said we can just make it a longer video. We're having fun here. So I think people are really appreciating the value you're dropping. So definitely.
Okay, great. Going. Oh, cool. I'm tabbed back over to the live stream. I didn't know that Javier and Ketki are already got their headsets ready.
Yeah, they've been having fun in another reality where we here.
Yeah, really.
We chose a different reality.
Yeah. one that doesn't have to listen to me talk. That's a shame.
Come on.
So I think that's mostly what I wanted to go over on the editor here. So if we wanted to, we could hop in, Javier and Ketki, if you're ready. I guess first, are there any other questions about editor stuff from the chat that we want to take? If not, I can just get going here. All right, cool. Javier, you're going to be hosting the
yeah. So I've gone into the build just for context setting. Kevin made a build earlier before the live stream started, and he distributed it to Ketki and I. He's now going to hit play in the editor. I already created a table for us to sort of like join. He's going to be joining from his computer, and Ketki from her headset, and I'll be joining from a headset as well. So you should be able to
joining too. I have my Google Cardboard.
Oh. Living in the future.
People in the chat being like, "Oh, cool to see the Quest Pro back in on someone's head." I have mine behind me. It's over there.
All right, so
you should. So yeah, those what you're looking at on Kevin's screen. That's the coaching card. So if you click continue there, it will sort of like give you a very high level onboarding, asking you to clear your space so that you can accommodate for a table. And then if you click continue again, you'll get sort of like very general indications for how to manipulate the table with the grab affordance and how to rotate it. Or you can just skip it if you don't want to see it. But you'll be seeing these in the headset as a headlocked coaching card with a delay as it follows you around.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if you want to skip that and just go into the table, I think I shared
and I also just want to point out that you're seeing a black screen here because I am in the editor, but typically you would have the pass-through enabled.
Yeah, you see your real world. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and then some things, I just wanted to call this out because I won't be able to give the full experience in the editor here, but like the handle affordances, it walks you through all of this, and like the handle affordances on the table are such a cool interaction piece.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely check those out. They like slide with your hand along the table to like stay with your movement and stuff. And I wish I could demo it in the editor here, but alas. All right, so I'm just going to be Unity creator here. So I'll continue.
Yeah, you can click the middle button. So that will list all the public tables. That's a live stream table. You should be able to join. And then I've muted myself in the build, so you won't see my avatar's mouth moving. And I believe Ketki.
Yeah, I've muted myself too.
Yeah.
I'm going to slide back a little bit to kind of give here. I'll minimize this as well to give
You can see how it's tracking hands live. You can see my video and my avatar.
And you have the crown.
So that's all pretty cool. And I can also change between hands to controllers. And then you'll see how the fingers become not as fluid when I press the buttons, but you still have like hand representation for other people to see. So that's like a dynamic change that happens. I don't have to select any settings or anything. It just automatically recognizes the input.
If I could just slide in here real quick, let me, I'm going to just take a look at the UI since we haven't really had a chance to like do that. Well, so you'll see here, like, obviously we cannot see Ketki's and Javier's UI, but that's there for them. So this is all localized to you. So we have the different like seat positions as well, the game options and the table information. Javier, while doing the UI
on people, you can mute them as well. You have a couple of hovering option on the seat itself as well on the UI.
I think it's fun to just switch around, like Javier spoke about all the work that went into seat switching and what it takes to occupy a seat, because it's a fairly complicated logic. Like you want two people shouldn't be overlapping in the same place. Like how do you handle all of that? And it's just created and done for you. So I think it's really awesome if you want to get started.
You can also see like the fading out of the avatars as you kind of move into the space here.
And that little handlebar that Kevin was talking about, that's that little rectangle that's hovering beneath the board. It actually, I think this is like you should download the build and check it out for yourself, because we cannot do justice by describing what it does. But if you click on it with your controller, it will expand to very clear. It's a very simple design, but it's very clear that it's enabling you to move the board around, and then that same bar will just rotate nicely around the edge, and it becomes the rotation handle.
Oh, and I would be remiss if Joe's probably in the chat screaming at me to mention this. When you move the table, you are actually moving your player. So the way it's built is the table, we're trying to keep the table at the origin of 0, 0, 0. So we simulate moving the table by actually just, if you move the table to the left, you're actually moving your avatar to the right of the table.
Oh, I love that.
So that's kind of how that interaction works. Joe, you can thank me in the chat. I'll just show here. So you can see I can swap. Oh, they keep swapping tables. So I can swap seats as well. And now I'm flip-flopped with Javier and Ketki there. Let's see if there's any.
Yeah, I can also change seats, so you can see that. I'll move from 1 to 4. And you see how I'm not moving. It's just my avatar that's automatically moved.
Yeah.
Then I guess we can show some of the
games.
games.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I've selected the physics sandbox here, and everyone has like
cube shooter.
Yeah. So you can grab them, and these are networked objects. So that means that as Ketki is moving some objects, I can also interact with them. So not to mess with your contraption, but just for demo purposes, I'm sort of like grabbing a piece over there, and I can also maybe grab one of these bouncing balls and then insert it in there. Let me see how it like sort of like flies out.
Oh shit, I dropped some.
We also have a deletion ring, so we don't have an eraser, or we did not add any UI to sort of like control the spawning of or despawning of objects. So we use this sort of like object to delete things, and if things fall off the floor plane, they will just respawn in the middle. You can change those settings if you want. You can also change whichever pieces are being displayed on the table for whatever objects you want. You can change the amount, the position. Everything is pretty easy to edit.
This vortex is pretty cool. I love how
it's so satisfying.
And you can also scale them, which is also nice.
Oh,
Nice.
Oh
So
yeah,
it has those
giant eraser.
Yeah. You can't delete avatars or the table, but you can.
It's also a good example of the type of VFX you can get in XR without, getting too much polygons and stuff like that. It still works very smoothly.
I guess we can move on to show the slingshot. One note: when you move between games, any objects that you've spawned or instanced will not get cleared, so you will have to manually sort of like take them and remove them. There we go.
Love
so
that.
Now we can move to the
You
slingshot.
gotta keep your house clean even in XR? Oh man.
You got to embrace the magic of the medium and clean it for yourself.
Yeah, so this game, you're supposed to intersect the little virtual square that appears in front of you, and you do a pinch gesture and a pullback to sort of like target the balloons. I don't know if you're able to see the trajectory of the projectiles that Ketki and I are sort of like spawning.
We can, yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, you can see the sort of like the trail effect corresponds to the shirt color of the person, so that you know who's hitting what. And there's also sort of like collision within the bounds of the gameplay. And you can see the vortex up here. So the game ends once 3 balloons have sort of like been abducted by the vortex. You have a health indicator. So the 3 hearts are sort of like your 3 chances for losing balloons. So once 3 balloons hit the top, the game ends. And we also display the score on the left side of the UI with a balloon.
It's a really cool concept for a game in itself, outside of XR.
So that's
Kevin, is there a way for you to move the controller models from the screen?
Yeah, I didn't want to mess too much with the simulator. I don't.
Oh yeah, it's fine. That's fine.
I can get.
And now we have chess.
Someone in the chat asked, any inclusion of the player's real environment for digital to physical interactions and physics?
I believe we're going to be integrating some ARF features soon, so that you can have collision with like walls, etc. I don't think it's in yet, but it should be coming.
But
So,
there is
yes.
the modes, what is that called?
The immersion control.
Yeah, the immersion control.
So on Kevin's end, you won't be able to really see the effect when he presses between AR, MR, and VR, and that will just create like a virtual volume or immerse you in a complete virtual environment. But I think the question from the chat was more about like making the physical world provide collisions and interactions.
Joe actually answered, and it said in the current mixed reality multiplayer template, no, but those features will come in the future. The MR non-multiplayer template has those things.
Yeah, just the MR template has collision, but not MR multiplayer.
Perfect.
Just because I know you guys are in the headset, I'm just demoing here the volume. So as I move around the table, you can see the volume moving. And normally the black part again would be the pass-through view.
The pieces animation is so satisfying.
Yeah.
Let me zoom in on that real quick.
Absolutely. It reminds me of how you were discussing earlier about the buttons, right? Like with this kind of like interaction until you push all the way down. It's very different from the transition from the top of the button all the way down. And you can see it on the chess pieces very well.
Mm-hmm.
It's micro movements like to the T. And someone is saying, I love how his avatar is explaining to us while his hands movement are mapping. That's the beauty. It's in real time.
Yeah, so I don't think we're going to have time to go through a full chess match. It was more about just demoing how easy it is to transition between games. And
sure. Another way to say that you're afraid of Ketki. All right.
Oh, yeah. It's probably so much better than me on chess, so I'm not even going to try.
Javier, dude, can you poke one of the chess pieces?
Yeah.
Do they have, I'm trying to see if I can see any affordances. We cannot. I was like, but from your end, they have the affordance and is it the move suggestions, right?
Yeah.
So when you press a piece, you sort of like see the valid cells where you can move. Like a pawn, for example, you see like 2 cells in advance if you're starting the move, and it all corresponds to each piece. So all of the logic and the rules of the chess game are sort of like already pre-built in here for you to like leverage.
I can't remember if they apply here. I'm sure you guys brought this in, but I know in the hands demo scene that we have in our samples in XRI, we have a poke piece that has the affordance that will like shrink down under your finger. So it feels like you're like deforming it down. So all those examples are in there as well for that poke interaction.
Yeah, something to mention is when you're doing hand tracking, this tabletop games work so well with a poke because you're getting the tactile response from an actual table. So when I use hand tracking and if I move the piece and I press on any of the other tiles, it feels like I'm actually interacting with a physical board just because it's placed on a physical table.
How are we doing on time? Because I see that it's 10:26 over here in the clock indicator.
We can keep going, honestly.
Okay.
Let's ask the chat. Do you guys want to see more of those, or do we move forward? In the meantime, Joe was also saying, basically, if it hasn't been mentioned before, this is all the default template, right? So you don't need to configure any multiplayer services. It all links through Unity Cloud and your Unity account. So it just works. And Kevin basically simply made a new project based on the template, switch it to Android, and made the build so that Javier and Ketki are using it. So no settings needed to configure it either.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
Yeah, we try to pay a lot of attention to that sort of like onboarding experience when you go into the editor and try to automate as much as possible. So all you had to do was click that configure UGS button and then go to like, go make your build. Like it's just that easy. It sounds weird, but it should be that easy.
And not to plug the other templates, I know we're focusing on this one, but that's also the case. Obviously, like the VR template and the MR template don't have the multiplayer stuff that you need to configure, or like the UGS stuff that comes configured, I should say. But the VR multiplayer template, the same thing. It should just be out of the box, switch to Android, and pretty much go. So great place to start. Cool. Let's see. Is there anything you guys want to see from my end with this UI that we haven't quite covered? I think we've went over
Maybe
these.
you could just press all the buttons so we can talk
Yeah,
about what they do. I think one cool thing that we can talk about is how we adapted the XRI keyboard onto the table. So if you go to like input your name.
Yeah.
So yeah, we kind of like took the keyboard that Kevin built and Frankensteined it to fit the form factor of the table. So we had to change the layout of the keys and replace a couple of things. We also tilt the preview bar for the text so that it's easier to read. And there's a couple of considerations that we had to take there. But it just shows how easy it is to modify what we already provide out of the box.
Yeah. And it was really easy to modify and build your own custom keyboard, right, Javier? I did a great job with that.
Yes. Yeah, it was pretty easy.
It is pretty.
No code required. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah. I'll just narrate what I'm seeing here. So then we have the other table option. So if you wanted to join other tables, host a table, enter code as well. The code, I think, will bring up the keyboard as well on the table there. And then just some of your various settings. So you can adjust volume settings, microphone, and voice chat. And yeah, those are the main ones.
Yeah, another nice call out here. So if you press that arrow, you see how the microphone button does not go away. That's intentional so that you always are able to sort of like toggle your microphone regardless of the state of the menu. So we sort of like created an exception for that. And if you're being annoying, other people can just mute you, right? They can just look at your name tag and press that button, which will deactivate the microphone for them, not for you. So yeah, we indicated with a red ring, and once someone mutes themselves, it should show sort of like the cross in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Cool.
So you're always in control no matter what. And that goes back to also Ketki's principles earlier about the personal space, which is the near field interactor, but also your space bubble. When you're designing social VR experiments, you might want to think about how to make people feel safe at all time, creating a way for them, for example, to teleport out of a room, to disable everyone's microphone, so that the user always feels like they're in control at all time.
Yeah. Also, a small detail which Javier mentioned, but you're seeing it live, is the T-shirt matching the the bubble. So that's like a nice little touch, like just by the color that it's which person that is.
And also the outline on the table, you see how there's sort of like a gradient in the center that corresponds to the coordinate on which each seat is defined. So
neat details.
Little things. Yeah.
How many user stories on the design team for all those?
Not enough. We have a huge backlog of things that we still want to add to make it even better. Specifically for settings, now that you have it open right there, like I think there's a bunch of things that we could do or add in there, and hopefully we'll get to roll those out soon.
Sick.
Cool.
Yeah.
Was there anything else particularly that you wanted to share with the audience?
I wanted to mention, if people are using the MR multiplayer template to make a experience that is different from a tabletop game experience, but it's more like if the intention of the experience is changing from interacting with close friends to strangers, you might want to consider how the distances and the environment changes, because if you are playing with your friends, the comfortable distance to interact with is very different from the way you interact with strangers. Like this distance that is built for tabletop games is, I think, around 2 feet, and it feels comfortable. But if strangers, you want to keep them even more away. And like public speaking platforms, like if you're doing something like that for MR, you might want to place people a little further away, and then the safety bubble might have to increase even more.
That's true.
Another thing that we built in here is the privacy settings. So when you are hosting a table, you can toggle privacy on and off. And what that would do is that instead of your table by default getting listed in the public tables list that Kevin showed earlier, it will not be displayed there. And you can only access that table with a code that we automatically generate and is listed on the table information. So that way you sort of like avoid awkwardness of someone just randomly jumping into your table if you didn't intend for it to be open. So think about those things, I guess, when you're designing your own experiences.
And, I'll just add one thing. I think that the templates are a great place, not only to start with like XR development, but like to really get a good handle on like the XR packages that I went over that kind of make up this environment, because you'll, like I said, a lot of the samples are pulled into the templates. So as you progress in your development, you'll see a lot of the same things coming from the same aspects, and you can learn how XRI works and how the XR hands package does like hand tracking and stuff. So it's a great place to learn on top of like building your own experiences.
Thank you, team. That was awesome. Did you have a good time? It was fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
That's great.
I'm
It's a
seeing
great way
people
to start
asking,
Kevin's birthday.
Yeah.
right? Hopefully you get your rest of your day off, Kevin.
You should have given him the crown.
Oh,
Javier.
yeah.
Missed
That
the
was
part.
very-
Do a filter.
So
Just a balloon
selfish.
effect, something.
We need to add a cake, a virtual cake
The
to that
cake was a
table.
lie. The cake was a lie the entire time.
Yeah.
But I think we need to have you guys back because everybody had such a good time, and I'm hearing people are craving more XR content from us. So it's great to see that the XR community is well alive at Unity. So thank you for those beautiful insights and all of the knowledge. And we have more to share. So anything before I start wrapping up?
We have a new device simulator already released.
Yes.
So you can go and try that. The one that Kevin showed was the classic simulator, which was before this release, but we have a newer one, which you can try in some of these other releases. And this was super fun.
Yay.
I can't wait to chat more with people and send us feedback on things, because we are reading and we'd love to.
Absolutely. Actually,
share
this is a
more.
great call out, Ketki. So I'm putting right now the links in the chat for Discord and discussions forum. These are the places where you can ask questions to Unity. Even if we couldn't go through everything today, drop your questions. The forum is probably the best place, the discussions forum, because we can actually track. It creates threads. People can answer. Obviously, if you're more on Discord, we have people there that reads and answers stuff too. So now you have the links in the chat, and then yeah, I just wanted to shout out quickly the team at Dream Park. Visit dreampark.com. I'm going to put the link in the chat as well. They made an amazing game that got released very recently. It's augmented reality. It's fun. It's made with Unity. So give it a look. It might inspire you for your next project. And if you're interested into those live stream, this is their first time coming and you're not aware of the schedule, we do have our next stream already planned. So it's happening on April 17th. Jackson will be back by then. So this is just me today, but I'll come back. I promise I'll come back again. But yeah, Unity Studio Productions on bringing Dredge to mobile. So it's going to be a very interesting live as well. So thank you again. This was super fun. I had fun. And thank you for being so cool in the chat, sharing information. The community has a lot of knowledge, not just us. It's always our pleasure to share our knowledge, but it's great to see also the community itself helping each other out. The XR community is a big one as well. So thank you again, and see you next time.